No, turn that racket off right now. This street is supposed to be quiet, and I will not have you blasting twang across the whole block. Is there anything else? You crank it up on me. HOA President Rowena Foss showed up on the front porch of 16 Tanglewood Court and handed the homeowner a stack of 11 fabricated violation notices totaling $4,750 in unenforceable fines, citing noise disturbance, aesthetic disruption, and conduct unbecoming a Cedarbrook Estates resident, all because he'd been playing country music on his own porch on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. She told him point-blank that if every fine wasn't paid in full within 30 days, she would file a formal lawsuit to recover the debt and place a lien against his deed with the Williamson County Clerk's office. What she had no idea about was that the homeowner had been photographing and logging every single notice since the day he moved in, had already retained a civil rights attorney who specialized in HOA harassment, and was about to file a lawsuit against her so thorough and so airtight that it wouldn't just end her presidency. It would trigger a county-wide audit of every fine she'd issued over the past 6 years. Gideon Prescott, 38, a high school history teacher at the largest public school in Conyers, Georgia, had moved into 16 Tanglewood Court in the Cedarbrook Estates subdivision of Rockdale County 8 weeks before any of this kicked off. Cedarbrook Estates was a middle-class neighborhood of brick ranch homes, wide sidewalks, and mature oak trees old enough to grow over the power lines. It was the kind of place where people kept their lawns trimmed, kept their business private, and mostly left each other alone. Gideon had bought the house after 12 years of renting across 3 different counties, moving in with nothing more complicated on his mind than wanting a quiet place to come home to after a long day in the classroom. His routine was simple. He'd come home, change out of his work clothes, make something to eat, and sit on his front porch with a cold drink and a Bluetooth speaker, running through whatever country playlist he was on that week. It wasn't loud. It didn't rattle windows or carry down the block. It was the kind of volume that fills a porch and fades out before it reaches the sidewalk. His immediate neighbors on either side had never once complained, and a couple of them had actually walked over in his first few weeks to introduce themselves while the music was still playing. Rowena Foss, 59, had served as HOA president of Cedarbrook Estates for 11 straight years, and had built a reputation across Rockdale County's property management circles as someone who treated her position like a personal enforcement weapon rather than a community service. She had a well-documented pattern of targeting new residents with violation notices within their first 90 days. 3 previous homeowners had already complained about it to the board, and the board had brushed each complaint aside without ever looking into it. She'd clocked Gideon the week he moved in, watching his property from across Tanglewood Court with the focused attention of a woman already hunting for an angle. The first fine showed up in his mailbox 11 days after he moved in. It cited grass length exceeding 4 inches along his front border, grass Gideon had personally cut just 4 days earlier. He photographed the notice, photographed his lawn, and saved both images, dated, in a folder on his phone. He didn't pay it. 3 more notices followed over the next 2 weeks. A trash bin left visible from the street for an estimated 40 minutes past the HOA's collection window. A welcome mat flagged as an unapproved exterior modification, and a wind chime described as a recurring noise disturbance. Gideon photographed every single one and kept right on playing his music. Before we continue, tell us what city or country you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. And if you believe no HOA president has the right to fine a man for playing music on his own porch, hit that like and subscribe button and join us here on Karen Unhinged. It was a Saturday afternoon in late November when Rowena Foss crossed Tanglewood Court and stepped onto Gideon's porch without an invitation. He was sitting in his usual spot, drink in hand, speaker resting on the railing, a Morgan Wallen playlist running at the same volume it always did. Rowena stood at the top of his porch steps, clipboard pressed against her chest, and informed him that country music wasn't appropriate for a community like Cedarbrook Estates. That the genre created an atmosphere inconsistent with the neighborhood's standards. And that if he kept playing it, she'd have no choice but to make it a formal HOA matter with financial consequences attached. She said it with total seriousness and zero awareness of how absurd it sounded. Gideon looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone, turned the volume up 2 notches, set it back on the railing, and asked her exactly which bylaw prohibited country music on a residential porch in Rockdale County. Rowena told him he knew exactly what he was doing and that she wasn't there to debate bylaws with him. Then she turned and walked back across the street. The fines started coming faster after that. Over the following 3 weeks, Gideon racked up 8 more violation notices, invented infractions, misquoted bylaws. Fines with absolutely no legal grounding anywhere in the Cedarbrook Estate's governing documents. The total against his deed climbed to $4,750 and kept rising. Gideon didn't pay a single dollar of it. He photographed every notice, logged the date and the cited bylaw, cross-checked each one against the actual governing documents, and dropped it all into the same folder he'd been building since week 1. Then Rowena had the HOA's legal representative send a formal letter threatening to sue him for the full unpaid balance and force compliance through the courts. Gideon read the letter once, picked up his phone and called his attorney. He filed first. Gideon's attorney, a civil litigation specialist named Harold O'Shea, based out of Atlanta, filed a lawsuit against Rowena Foss and the Cedarbrook Estates HOA board in Rockdale County Superior Court on a Wednesday morning. The filing ran 41 pages. It cited harassment, selective enforcement, fabricated violation notices, abuse of HOA authority, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Every fine Rowena had levied against Gideon since day 1 was listed out individually, alongside the bylaw she'd cited, and the actual bylaw text proving no such restriction existed. 11 violations, 11 fabrications, all documented, all photographed, all dated. The filing also included something Rowena had never seen coming. A comparative enforcement analysis Harold had pulled from Rockdale County's Property Records Office, covering every violation notice issued in Cedarbrook Estates over the previous 6 years. What that analysis revealed wasn't subtle. Of the 340 formal violation notices Rowena had issued across her 11-year presidency, 287 of them had targeted residents who'd moved into the neighborhood within their first 90 days. The pattern wasn't random. It was a system, and Harold used that exact word in the filing. System because that's exactly what it was. Rockdale County Superior Court accepted the filing that same day. Rowena got her copy through her personal attorney 2 days later. Her attorney called Harold's office that afternoon to ask for a settlement conversation. Harold told them his client had no interest in settling and would see them in court. The HOA board received their copy of the filing the same day as Rowena and called an emergency meeting that evening. For the first time in 11 years, board members sitting around that table started asking questions about Rowena's enforcement record they should have asked years before. One board member called for a full internal audit of every fine issued since 2018. Another one called their insurance carrier before the meeting was even over. Nobody spoke up to defend Rowena. The room sat in the particular silence of people quietly calculating their own exposure. Rowena Foss hired a second attorney by the end of that same week. The case never made it to trial. Rowena's legal team approached Harold O'Shea 6 weeks after the filing with a settlement offer. Harold turned down the first 2. The third was accepted. Not because it was generous, but because Gideon wanted it over, and the number was enough to cover every legal fee, every fabricated fine, and a substantial sum on top, which the court's final order described as damages for sustained harassment. The settlement went into the public record at Rockdale County Superior Court, unsealed. Anyone who wanted to read it could. The internal audit the board had requested came back 3 weeks later and confirmed exactly what Harold's comparative analysis had already shown. A years-long pattern of targeted enforcement against new residents, with no bylaw basis and no board oversight whatsoever. The audit findings were sent to the Georgia HOA Regulatory Board, which opened a formal investigation into Cedarbrook Estates within 30 days of receiving them. 4 board members who'd signed off on Rowena's enforcement actions without ever reviewing them were issued formal reprimands. 2 of them resigned before the investigation even wrapped up. Rowena Foss was removed from the HOA presidency by a unanimous board vote the very same week. The audit results came back. The legal fees from the lawsuit and the regulatory investigation drained her finances faster than she'd ever prepared for. She listed her home at 21 Tanglewood Court 5 months after the settlement was signed, and sold it below market value just to close quickly. She left Cedarbrook Estates on a Tuesday morning without saying goodbye to a single person on the street. Gideon Prescott was out on his porch when the moving truck pulled away. His speaker sat on the railing. Morgan Wallen was playing at the exact same volume it always had. Nobody came across the lawn to tell him to turn it down. If this story reminded you that patience and documentation are the most powerful weapons a homeowner will ever have, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're dealing with an HOA president who's turned your home into a battlefield, drop your story in the comments. You're not alone, and we want to hear it. See you on the next one, right here on Karen Unhinged.